Over the past 3 months, I've been hard at work at my next project, American Evil, releasing October 1st, 2024. I started this project in July, immediately after releasing Jaw of the Dragon. I really, really love the core concept and the idea, and I think it's time to start talking about like the kind of the beginning aspects of this, the stuff that's been set in stone, like some of the things that have changed already, and kind of the initial thought process. Because I've talked about some of this stuff already, on streams, and I believe on the website I did a brief write up on this, but there have been some interesting developments for American Evil, stuff that was not originally intended. And I do think the big thing that like fans are going to notice is that this is, you know, a sequel to Cruel and Beautiful. And that was not actually intentional. What happened was that I simply developed the plot. I came up with the plot of like, oh, a witch, a girl sacrifices a bunch of lives to become a witch, right? Some guy she knows doesn't like it, sets out on a quest to kill her, and on his way, he meets a bunch of like really powerful people with their own skill sets, their own abilities, their own ability to their own powers that they can use to fight monsters like the witches of Ignis, right? Sinistra, her name is. She is the primary antagonist. The main witch we have to beat. And like one of these people is, of course, like Soliel Blade, the vampire hunter from Cruel and Beautiful, the one that like fights MRSU, the one that hates MRSU more than anything. And I've talked about Soliel a lot. She's always, I think, been one of my favorite characters. I created her to be a foil for MRSU. I really, really loved the character concept. She essentially became the protagonist of Cruel and Beautiful, in spite of not being the main character. She's essentially the hero of Cruel and Beautiful, despite not actually being the main character, because the main character sucks. I dislike Mike with a burning passion. So yeah, Solio was like great and Cool and Beautiful, but like because the plot wasn't necessarily focused on her, a lot of like the ideas I had for her, her development, her background, like a lot of that stuff was like pushed by the wayside, right? Like the plot isn't about her, and like Solio isn't like a very self-centered person. Quite the opposite, actually. She's very, very selfless. The complete opposite of Amara's right? Like, in spite of being like very, very kind of aloof and kind of cold, standoffish, very stereotypically French, I would say. She is French. Soliel is very, very, very driven to do good in the world, right? And in a lot of different ways too. It's not like she's just going out hunting vampires all the time, right? So like American Evil kind of emphasizes what her personal life is a little bit more, a little bit, and eventually, uh, uh, like she, the protagonist, American Freeman, and a handful of other characters like return to the town of Ignis that's controlled by this evil cult that worships the elemental archfiend, right? Ignis, the witches there to fight the witches there, right? So you have a handful of people like going there for their own reasons to try and like collapse this this organization that controls this specific community with an iron fist, that controls everything, controls everyone. The people that aren't directly controlled want to be controlled because you get all these insane perks, right? You can basically do whatever you want if you're in like the inner circle of the Ignis, right? So, like, in order to pop this bubble, right, in order to like kill all these witches, like, you're gonna need a lot of firepower, a lot of people, a lot of like a real plan, and essentially the protagonist, American, like starts out with nothing, right? But over time, he accumulates more and more tools, more and more like resources, more and more people who can help him topple this threat. And I would argue that like Salil is the biggest asset he has, right? Which is really interesting because she wasn't originally intended to be in the novel. Initially, I simply brainstormed a bunch of different concepts of characters, and then I decided that yeah, it's time to bring Soliel back. It's time to give her some time in the limelight. Let's make her a main character. And before you know it, she's the love interest. She's his wife, right? They get married before they go back, right? It's actually kind of charming how it happened. Like I really felt that like, oh yeah, a boy and a girl spending time together, like fighting monsters. Of course they're gonna fall in love, right? Which is really interesting because the thing about this is that like Salil was not supposed to be the love interest. The love interest was actually another girl, like Windsor Ellenwy, who is a witch who is like opposed to the Ignis, right? She is with the Windsor, right? A completely different like we'll call them a sect for now, a coven. Like she has a different demon master that's like at odds with the Ignis, and like she does not like them, right? Like and she's the one that like meets American first, sets him on his journey, sets him up with like the people that introduce him to Salil, right? Like a big reason why things go the way they do is because of her, right? But because of like the way the plot turned out, this girl, Ellen Wee has been cucked. She's been made a side character, which is really funny considering she's actually the first character I conceptualized for this story. Like the character of American Freeman, the protagonist, like he was created to be her love interest. And so like the reason I decided to go in this different direction, marrying him to Salil instead, like Jaw the Dragon, right? Eye of the Dragon. I had a very specific mindset. I had a very specific plan for all of the characters, right? Like I designed characters to be in relationships with each other, right? I established that like, Jack, Margaret, Belladonna, I kind of established that like, yeah, Margaret was interested in pursuing Jack. Then Belladonna ends up with him instead after she dies. And then originally in Jaw the Dragon, like she was supposed to die, and then Avelina was supposed to take her place, right? There were very specific plans for how this was going to go in the Order of the Dragon books, right? But like as it so happens, like, being an amateur, right, not knowing what I was doing, I really like fumbled the ball with like the Belladonna character, right? Like I really didn't feel like she was that in focus. I didn't feel like she had all that much to do with the plot. Like I felt like she was kind of superfluous and kind of like a side character, kind of a satellite love interest. In spite of how interesting I think she is, how cool her backstory is, how interesting her powers are, she doesn't do anything for like basically two books, right? Like because I made the decision of making her a love interest, unilaterally before I had actually written the book, like she ended up like I ended up like it's kind of I think they call this situation like strangled by the red string, where like an author has to like force two characters to be together because they're supposed to be together and not because like it's organic or interesting at all right? I really struggled with that. And like with American Evil, one of the things I really wanted to get away from was that mindset that I have to pair characters up because like I intended to, right? And what's happened is that like because Ellenwy and American were designed to have this very natural chemistry and this very, real relationship, this very real genuine friendship, she's essentially become like the other woman in the relationship. And it's kind of an interesting direction for the character to take. I've never really done anything like this before. I've never really tried to handle this kind of situation before, but like I said, this is very much a sequel to Cruel and Beautiful in this sense, where you have like, this male protagonist and these two like very strong female supporting characters. Well, I would argue Salil's a Duchernagus, but you have these very cool, like interesting female characters, like getting in these fights with like these crazy supernatural like monsters, right? Like it's very similar to that, right? And like that wasn't really intentional, right? But like that's the way it turned out. And of course, there are other characters on both the good and the evil side. Well, we'll call them like the freedom fighters and the Ignis, right? Um, w- there are definitely a lot. There's definitely a big conflict. There are definitely a lot of characters on both sides who are fighting each other for their own reasons. But like, I think a lot of the plot is driven by those three. Like without those three, a lot of the things that happen in this book simply would not happen, right? They are the main characters, to be completely blunt with you, right? And I'm very, very, very interested in seeing like how they develop further. Like specifically, Salil is a really interesting example because I think this is the first example of something I wanted to do since I started writing was like utilize a character that I'd used before in a way that I what wouldn't be obvious, right? Like with Salil, when I introduced her, like I always intended for her to return. I always intended for her to do more stuff. I had like lots of different ideas for things I wanted her to do, whether it's like fighting vampires in France or like, having family drama or whatever. There were lots of ideas for things I want to do. She was originally slated to appear in Jaw the Dragon, right? She was originally going to like, she was originally like, I was going to do all sorts of things with her, but like in the end, I married her to American and got her involved in this completely different situation than than she would have otherwise. Because, like, she doesn't fight witches, right? That's not really her thing. That's not what she's trained to do. But she's proving to be good at it. It's a lot of fun seeing these witches, like, deal with this, like, crazy powerful vampire hunter. Someone who's, like, way beyond their level in a lot of ways. Of course, like Elenwe and American are also very capable, but like Salil really is on a whole other level, to the point where like I honestly think she might be right now like the second strongest character in the franchise, in the Codyverse, probably only behind like Ryoko from Jaw the Dragon. I can't think of anyone else that like really can do the things she's gonna do in this novel, right? Like I am a very excited to like keep working on this and keep like expounding on these ideas and like iron out all like the problems it has and really make this book as strong as possible, like really make it good, right? The past couple of books have been like very experimental. Rabbit Hole doesn't have fantasy elements. uh Lauren Frey doesn't even have fights. Jaw the Dragon, it was a sequel, kind of poorly conceived in a lot of ways. Like, this is the first time I've ever felt like I'm really going out there and making something that, like, I really, really, really want to make, right? This is the kind of stuff that I love doing, right? These crazy, convoluted, like, very Shonen Jump-ish, like, battle sequences, right? The stuff you see in One Piece or Dragon Ball Z, Yu Yu Hakusho, the stuff I grew up loving, right? Like, this is what I want to do, right? And seeing this develop and seeing it take shape and seeing it like build up to its conclusion is very, very exciting. And I hope that all of you are very excited for October 1st, 2024, next year, when I finally release this book to the public, right? I hope this goes on to be my defining project, so far, right? I hope this is a very popular release. I hope people really, really enjoy it. I I hope you stay invested for future titles, right? I am very excited for American Evil, and I cannot wait until you guys get to read it.